Welcome to Godsplaining, Contemplative Preachers, Contemporary Age. Each week, join the Dominican friars as they consider all things Catholic.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Godsplaining. This is one of our special monthly episodes, which we have so cleverly named Guest-splaining, where we invite a voice that is not a Dominican friar to the show. But first, an introduction of your friar voices. My name is Father Patrick Mary Briscoe, and I'm so glad to have you listening to this episode or joining us on YouTube. Thanks to the magic of internet telephony, you can see our faces. The other friar voice on this episode today is Father Jacob Bertrand Jancic, the vocations director of the province of St. Joseph. Say hello to our listeners, Father.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. It's great to be here. We're back on Zoom, Father Patrick and I here. So we're back kind of retreating into the cave, contrary to what Plato would encourage us to do, to sort of climb out of the cave into the light. So if we're looking a little more less attractive, it's because of Zoom. Tech problems. There we go. But as you know, because you've listened hopefully to more than one episode, our tech savvy is at level zero. So we're getting there.
Yeah, it's sort of a, progression of sorts. Anyway, today we're so excited to have joining us, despite all of these things, Mr. Kaiser Johnson. Kaiser has had a remarkable experience of life in the church and has a very interesting career, all of which he will tell us about. So Kaiser, welcome to Godsplaining.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm jazzed to be here. So,
Kaiser, where are you joining us from? This is part of our charm. We often like to introduce that I'm in Providence or Father Jacob Bertrand is in Washington. Where are you?
Well, right now I'm in Phoenix, Arizona area. So,
nice.
I've lived all over the Los Angeles area for the last 12 years or so. And right now we are spending some time in the Phoenix area. I don't know if anyone has paid any attention to what's gone on across the world and across the country, and particularly in LA over the last 14 months or so. LA got crazy. So we're here in Arizona, which is nearby enough for us to go over and work in LA, but it's just a little more sane. So. Yeah.
Now that's important for you, right? As a family man, I presume that was the decision you felt like you needed to make for your family.
Yes, absolutely. That was, my wife and I were talking throughout last year. And LA was crazy last year. For 2 months, my wife and our at that time 1.5-year-old daughter didn't leave the house. They did not leave our apartment. And it was crazy. So we just, felt like we needed a place to be that was, where there was a little more space, a little more openness, a little more family values, and this place supportive of us, just living a regular life, even in the midst of life not being regular. And
right.
So, but we still wanted to be close enough that we could still be working when jobs came up and that kind of thing. And so we found that Phoenix, Arizona was close enough. We can take a 45-minute flight and be back in Burbank. And that actually is a shorter commute than when we were living in Marina del Rey in Los Angeles.
Wow, no kidding.
That's crazy.
Dang.
That's a 25-mile drive from Marina del Rey on the far west side of LA to Burbank on the far east side of LA. It takes in rush hour. It took longer than flying back from Phoenix. So
that's wow, crazy.
Yeah,
man,
that's incredible.
I thought DC was traffic. Well, I know LA traffic is bad, but living in DC traffic can be pretty miserable. But I don't think it really compares to that. So glad that you can get on a plane and get to work more quickly than hopping in your car. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is the truth. So
yeah. So living in Phoenix, but you mentioned a couple of times, and we were just talking about you're working in LA. You've quite the resume, kind of a varied resume too, from some acting and writing and speaking and these kind of things. I guess catch us up on what you do on those sort of things. Why going to LA? What's going on in your life? What are you working on?
Yeah. So, well, you're right. It is kind of a varied thing. So, in addition to writing nonfiction books, I also am currently working on a fiction series. I've written sketch comedy and a lot of stuff where I both act and write on a Catholic series that Family Theater produces in Hollywood. Actually, I'm going back at the beginning of June to shoot some more of that. And that's called Catholic Central. And yeah, do some writing for that. And also am one of the two hosts of that along with Libby Slater, who's just an awesome person, and you should know that. And so I do that. And then I act on camera in movies, TV shows, and then I do a lot of voiceover. So that's been, especially during pandemic and so many things being shut down and that kind of thing. I've done a lot of that, video games and animated shows and some commercials and that kind of thing. So yeah, kind of all over the place. But if it's in anything that could be construed as entertainment, I'm probably
give a hand in it. Yeah, that's awesome. What are some of the on-screen stuff that you've done? Well, I know one that sticks out in my mind, so maybe.
And what's that one?
Well, Stranger Things, of course. It's one of, yeah, it's a great series, So, yeah. So you were on Stranger Things a bit, right?
Yeah. So I was in episode 3 of season 3 of Stranger Things. And that was a ton of fun to be on. I mean, everyone there, I think everyone there who is on the show and who works on the show realizes what a cool opportunity it is to shoot something that's set so firmly in the 80s and that kind of thing. And they really, the Duffer Brothers, really have a, I think it was, I don't remember, there's a German term for like being involved in every aspect of production. I think it was something that was related to Wagner and how he, planned everything out. He did everything on his shows when he was writing them. But that's a lot of the Duffer Brothers, my role on there was not a big role. It was, I was there for one day and I'm in the show for 3.5 minutes or something like that. But after I went to Hair and Wardrobe and spent my first day there, and they sent photos to the Duffer Brothers, and they were like, "Here's what Kaiser's going to look like, and here's what we've got for him for wardrobe, and here's what we've got for him for hair and makeup." And on a lot of shows, if you sent that to the producers of the show, they'd be like, "Oh, why are you sending this to me?" The director of the episode is going to handle that. I don't care, But the Duffer Brothers were, like immediately responding. They said, "Oh, no. Here's the look we're going for. It's an homage to Die Hard. Make him look like this guy." And so they sent it right back. And they're like, "Okay, Kaiser, come back into the trailer. We're going to redo everything." So it was fascinating to see how really they, and again, there's that kind of attention to detail that every single person on the production puts into it. So it was a ton of fun to work on. So yeah,
it's very awesome. Cool. But I presume a lot of our listeners though would know you from Unplanned, which is of course such a faith-based story. I mean, it is a story of faith and has an important pro-life message. Can you lead us through, Kaiser, a little bit about how your faith animates what you do and all of your efforts as a Catholic actor?
Sure. So what, it's a fascinating question because I think if you ask me, depending on the day, my answer is going to be wildly different. And
sure. Okay.
So on a very base level, like I think about, it's very easy to fall into the temptation as someone in something that a lot of people can see. Whether they do or not, that's a different question. But a lot of people can see things. It's easy to get to a point of going, well, it's my work is being used for good, and that's the most important thing about it. And this is my vocation, is to bring people to God through the great work that I do in my acting or my writing or whatever. And I remember being in confession with a priest a year and a half ago, and he was familiar with the work that I've done, and we were at the Religious Education Congress in Anaheim.
Oh, nice. Okay,
I was there for Catholic Central, and I was confessing to him, and he said in confession, he said, it's really important to remember that the work just because you do good work, it's very different from doing good and from being good. And I was like, wow, not pulling any punches there, are you, Father? Okay, I got it. I'm reading you loud and clear. But it's an important message, because I think it's so easy to make the work that we do more important than who we are in our work. And yes, there is certainly a call to all of us to, we're made in the image and likeness of God. And so there is a call to all of us to be creators. And I think first and foremost, and to take part in that creation of God, and God shares that with us, I think maybe most obviously in the creation of new immortal souls of children, but also in the creation of all things life-giving. And so there's for artists, and one of my favorite authors, G.K. Chesterton, would say that that all humans are called to be artists, that art is the signature of man, he says. But there's a special call in that artistic calling. Boy, I'm overusing that word now. But to image this creative love of God. And so that's a calling that I have to be aware of in the work that I do. But at the same time, it is just work. In the best of times, it can be very good work and it can affect people and that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's just work. It is a way that my call, I shouldn't give it a higher place of prominence than the fact that it provides for my family and it provides for my real vocation. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, no, it certainly did. No, and I really appreciate how we, look, it just fits the way we've been framing the conversation, right? Like we talk about you as a family man, how you made some decisions for your family, right? And right away, that put out for everyone to hear and everyone who's watching, for them to see exactly what it is that you're prioritizing in life, despite despite the interesting and incredible work, right?
Yeah. And I think listening to you talk too is very self-affirming for me. So I appreciate when people say things that make me feel like, oh yeah,
yes,
I'm right,
you are wonderful, Father Jacob Bertrand. We are so grateful for you.
Yeah. Often, as a vocation director, talking to young men and other people, but about, what it is that the Lord is asking them to do with their life. And I often give this answer, and I've been criticized for it being too Dominican, but I think it's right and it's good. And I'm a Dominican, and if you're talking to a Dominican, you're going to get a Dominican answer. But it's often, we think about what does the Lord want me to do? And really a question of a vocation, I think, is not a functional question. It's not about doing, though that's important. It's an ontological question. It's about being. It's who has the Lord made me to be. And as a man, as a woman, we do things that follow on who we are. So I think that's really insightful, not to sort of get trapped up in the sort of work world, as work defines whether or not I'm good, whether or not I'm loved, appreciated, all of those sort of things that we desire. Yeah.
Well, that is, and I, not to jump ahead, but in a book that we might talk about later, there's a whole chapter where that's something that I really examine is in Catholic circles, we try to baptize the vocabulary of things so that it allows us to put priorities where they ought not be put. And at least I find myself doing that. Let me just own that. I do that. And I think one of the big things is talking about our jobs as though it's our vocation. And no, it's not. That is not a vocation that is recognized by the church. Sorry, your job, no matter what your job is, it doesn't matter what your job is. There's the call to holiness, and there is the call to religious life, and there is or priesthood, and the call to married life. Those are your vocations. Your job is not your vocation. Opportunity is more important than it is. It can be very important, great, but it comes after your true vocation. So,
And all God's people said amen.
There we go. All right. Well, with that hot take, which I absolutely agree with, yet again, self-affirming. Thank you for that. We're gonna take a quick break here, and then when we return, we are actually going to talk about that book that Kaiser just mentioned. So sit tight, Father Patrick. If you're watching on YouTube, he's kind of like creepily raising the book into screen, so you might see it there. But stay tuned, and we'll be back in just a second.
You are listening to Godsplaining. Visit us at godsplaining.org to listen to our episodes, shop our store, and donate to our podcast. All gifts go to improving the podcast and bringing the gospel to more listeners. Thanks for your support.
Well, friends, thanks again for tuning in to Godsplaining. You're listening to Guestsplaining, our special episode, and joining us today again is Kaiser Johnson. So as we mentioned a little bit in the first part of the episode, we've been talking about this fantastic book, which Kaiser has written, which has just come out from our Sunday Visitor Press. And it has the very engaging title, and here I'm going to read it so that I say it exactly correctly: How to Be Miserable and Alone, or Discover a Life That Truly Matters. So Kaiser, how does one come to write a book like this?
Well, I like to say that it is, it's unfortunately a nonfiction book. And it's unfortunately a nonfiction book about my life. So something that I realized and have realized and continue to realize in my life, and continue to realize while I was writing the book and editing the book, and then even now, and I probably will continue to realize for the rest of my life, is that even as Catholics, even after, so I reverted to the church in college, and still, and throughout my life since then, still find it very easy to kind of slide into taking the advice of parties that don't have my best interest at heart, because they're more present in my life and more, and they're louder than the still small voice of God. And so there's so many things that I think, again, even as Catholics, that we can look at and we can go, well, yeah, here's how I can see that from a Catholic perspective, or yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. That's what I want to do. And kind of like what we were talking about saying, calling your job your vocation. And then like, it makes it your vocation. It doesn't make it your vocation just because you call it your vocation. But that there's all this advice that I've taken in my life at various points, that was supposed to make me happy and was supposed to fulfill me. And I found it didn't do that. And if I really looked to the advice of the saints, the advice of the church, the advice of scripture, it told exactly the opposite story. And that is where I find happiness, and that is where I find fulfillment. And that is where God fixes my broken heart, is when I listen to the voice of God and not these other voices that don't have my best interest at heart. So that's kind of how it came about. And I saw like a lot of my friends struggling with a lot of the same things that I'd struggled with. And I was like, right. You guys, you're so stupid friends. You should just do the right thing. Oh gosh, I don't do that either. I'm listening to the wrong voices too.
I mean, the book to me, Kaiser, has a little bit of the feel. I don't know if this was an inspiration or not, but to me, the book has a little bit of the same feel as Lost in the Cosmos, Walker Percy's notorious kind of anti-self-help book. Was that an inspiration? Is that on your radar?
I wish I could say I had read it and knew it, and it was, and I had none of those things are true. So,
well, it's a book that listeners who enjoy your book will also enjoy.
Okay, or vice versa.
True,
perhaps.
One of the things that I like, or that caught my attention about the book, is how beautifully Father Patrick read the title, but the title itself, that the word "or" is there, right? That how to be miserable and alone, or discover that life truly matters. And one of the things I think Father Gregory has probably said on other episodes of the podcast, but certainly I've heard him say it, that before he entered religious life, I'm trying to remember the triptych, that he was anxious, alone and sad, and after he entered religious life he's still anxious, alone, and sad, as if like, you know, entering religious life or finding your vocation or pursuing Christ somehow is like a magic wand. You know, sometimes I think in the spiritual life or in the pursuit of virtue, that's what we're looking for, that like if I just follow Christ a little bit better, I'll be a little bit happier, or if I just follow Christ, or if I pray a little bit harder, then somehow I will, you know, whatever, be a little bit more fulfilled. But I think life kind of teaches us the opposite, that those, that our Lord transforms those, and the life of goodness transforms them. But there's still a longing, right, for the kingdom, for something that, for that holiness that you're talking about at the first part of the episode. So I guess that's a long way to ask a question of sort of how in writing the book and putting these, the chapters together and all of that, how, I guess, how has that reality kind of informed your writing, your own life, what you would offer to people looking for, you know, that sort of escape from the dead end secular promises of the world?
Yeah. So it's true that there's not like if you find yourself all those adjectives, what was it? It was I
think
alone,
anxious, sad, and alone, or something like that. Something I'm probably making it up, but that's what I remember. Yeah,
the anxious, sad, and alone is that. So allow me to answer that question, not with another question, but with an anecdote, which is, I guess, a lot of what I do in the book too. Is there's not a magic wand to like just totally just altering the circumstances of your life in following Christ. But there can be a grace of altering how you experience those circumstances when you share them with Christ. Right. And I guess I think about that in regards to, when I was 24 years old, I had a wedding in the church, and lived with this, with this gal for 3.5 years. And it was, and for both of us, and so, I'm not saying anything that she wouldn't say too. It was miserable. It was awful. And we eventually got a divorce, and went through the annulment process, and the whole, the marriage aspect of it, and the divorce aspect of it, and the separation aspect of it, all of it was just awful. The annulment process was one of the most wonderful things I've ever gone through in my life. And one of the most important freeing experiences that changed me. And in the midst of that, so whenever anyone talks about, I tend to be really skeptical of like mysticism and stuff like that. And I know that that's not necessarily a great thing, but that is just where I'm at right now.
More self-affirmation.
Yes. Yeah. So wherever anyone talks about like, oh, I just have this vision or whatever, I'm like, okay, let me try really hard not to roll my eyes. So all that said, and not defended, just stated, in the midst of this kind of worst moments of suffering that I can recall in my life, I had what I would classify as kind of a vision. It was a brief vision, and it wasn't like I saw it there in front of me. Anyway, I'm not going to justify it anymore. I'm just going to explain it. and it was this, I saw Christ, and embracing the cross. And I was asking him, I was going, why am I being rejected by someone I'm trying to love? And why would you put me through this? I'm trying to serve you. What do you, and his reply was the cross, and him embracing it. And he said to me, I'm sharing my life with you. And in an instant, my whole experience of what I had just spent the last 3.5 years, 4 years experiencing changed. Where again, the circumstances were all the same. Nothing had changed as far as what was going on in my life and how complicated and messy and awful it was. But just suddenly I was like, oh, Christ is sharing this intimacy with me of, hey, if you want to know what it's like to fully love someone and not have them love you back. I've been there. Here I am. I'm there with you right now. And I don't have a good explanation for how it changed everything, but in an instant, it changed my whole perspective on everything. And I was like, this is God sharing intimacy with me. And it changed it. I wish I could say that it made me forever, super conscientious about not offending God through sin and that kind of thing. That would be great if that were the case. And it hasn't successfully done that, but it has totally changed one of the most painful experiences of my life into something that now it was a time of God sharing intimacy with me. And that God didn't take on human nature so that he could understand what it is to suffer, and he could understand what it's like for us. God took on human nature so that we could understand him.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I mean, one of the things that I most appreciated about the book, Kaiser, is exactly that kind of like redirection of where we're at to see something more, right? So as a college chaplain, you know, one of the things that I'm just trying, trying desperately to say in ways that are convicting and able to be heard, and are not in any way condemnatory. But one of the great chapters in the book is against the hookup culture, right? And I just found your take about the nature of human sexuality very refreshing and free. Can you say a little bit about what you're trying to share in the book?
Yeah. So let me just flip to there to jog my memory on what I do say. But
well, in my book, I write.
This actually, I mean, I know there are several chapters where I started talking. I think probably the one you're referring to is "Get Some Tonight." How our
correct? Yeah, but I wasn't going to say those words because I'm a Catholic priest. Yeah.
I'll say "Get Some Tonight." How hookup culture cripples our ability to love, I think, and it's something that again, it took me a lot of. It took me a shocking amount of painful discovery to just go, oh, someone else knows how to handle this better than me, and it's the church. And there's not just like oh well, here's some rules, I guess I should follow those kind of I'll begrudgingly do that,
right?
But like,
right,
this is a way that is inspiring and frees you up to actually be a better person, and to be, I don't want to say this or have people misconstrue what I'm saying, but to be a better lover, to be someone who can give love and receive love better. And again, would that I just did it better all the time, did love better all the time. But that when we listen to, we have this whole, right now we're in just this epidemic of problems around our sexuality in our culture, and especially in regards to hookup culture. There's everything from, I mean, again, like rampant sexual assault and all this stuff that comes out through, whether it's through the Me Too movement or the all women movement, or stuff that we just encounter in people that we know. Like, so many people, like women who I've talked to who they like really criticize the Yes All Women movement or the Me Too movement or that kind of thing. But they still go, oh yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, I've been stalked by guys before. Oh yeah, I've got run off the road by a guy before who just rolled down his window and was like, "You're hot," and then drove off. And yeah, I guess it's kind of scary to be alone anywhere where there's if and I'm like, wait, how are you describing this as like? Oh yeah, that's just kind of the dues paying of being a person. And it's like, it's not right for most people who aren't women, I guess. And so that and all of it stems from this problem. And again, whether it's that or contraception or abortion or our or sexual assault or abuse or all these things, it all stems from us not understanding what we really want in our hearts, and what really frees us up to love another person properly. And if we can just get that right, so much more of it falls into place. Again, not perfectly, we still make mistakes, we're human, but some things become unthinkable to us. And some of these worst aspects of the disorders that have been given to us in our fallen human nature become unthinkable. We go, I would, like, what, I bring up, the question of like Henry Cavill, all the flack that he got a year and a half ago about, saying in GQ Australia that he's like, well, you can't go chat up a woman because if she says no, and you keep pursuing her, she's like, he was trying to rape me. And if you don't, then she's like, why didn't you pursue me more? Why didn't you go past my no? And so,
right. Yeah, that's right.
Like, well, yeah, because the problem is that we've set up a situation where we've set up like all these problems, all these disordered ways of behaving around people and people that we're interested in, that yes, there is this scenario of we're tending towards having sexual assault in our hearts, of taking,
right.
Giving, of lust rather than love. And so it's not surprising that someone, even if you didn't touch them or you didn't assault them, could still have this icky feeling about how you treated them. And so again, I kind of talked around that a lot. I don't know if I answered the question, but
you did, absolutely. Now, as we kind of, as we kind of like, bring things together here at the end, what is the, you're not going to give away all of your 12 tricks to finding a life that truly matters, but what is the one message that you want people to find, to take away from, or if we don't want to say like the ultimate thing, what is one point, one moment in the book that you think really conveys what the project is about?
Well, I mean, I started with a chapter called The Universe Has a Plan and end it with a chapter called You're in Control. And I think that's kind of they do serve to, and I had some help with the editor of laying it out like that, which is great. So thank you, Rachel Martin, for that. Rebecca Martin, excuse me. Oops, Rebecca Martin, thank you for helping me with that. But I think that's kind of the place to go to start and end is like, start there of giving God, trusting God with and just as I say it, it sounds so like cliched and trite and whatever, but just of going, okay, I'm going to trust you, God, and help me trust you because I don't know how to do that well. And then also listening to God's messengers, listen to the saints, listen to the church, and don't act like we've got to get this all figured out for ourselves. There are, nothing is new under the sun. I got a whole chapter about Solomon in there too, or that's heavily focused on Solomon and what a miserable and alone person he was, even though he had everything he ever wanted.
Right.
And that if we can just know that someone has walked this road before, and there are those who have walked this road before who have come out of it saints and the most joyful people that you can imagine. Maybe we ought to listen to their advice instead of people who are still down in the muck of it and trying to figure out, I don't know. Yeah, you should. It doesn't make any sense why you can't just sleep with anybody randomly. And then there's some kind of, it makes it hard to commit to the next person that you're in a relationship with. Like, why are we taking that advice? Let's take the advice of people who found something inspiring and joyful. So anyway, there you go. That's it.
That's great. Thanks very much. That's really great. Yeah. So for those of you listening or those of you watching, definitely check out Kaiser's book. You can grab it on Amazon. Father Patrick is giving it another lovely display, right? How to Be Miserable. And there's Kaiser. See, they're both doing their jobs of advertising their books.
Maybe
and a book that you should check out.
Father. Here, hang on. Let me hand it to you. I'm just going to hand it to you over here.
I don't have
there
it on my
it is.
desk. There you go. Wow. Time travel book. The book even time travels, guys. You got to check it out. You really have to check it out. How to Be Miserable and Alone, or Discover a Life That Truly Matters by Kaiser Johnson. Get it on Amazon. Also, if you are listening to the episode and you leave a comment, we'll do a little giveaway through Godsplaining. We're going to give away a few copies of his book too. So Father Patrick, before he takes us out, I'm making this little announcement that if you leave a comment on our podcast, we will draw a raffle and or draw names, whatever. I don't know. I don't draw. Do you draw a raffle? No, you don't. You enter a raffle and you make a drawing from the raffle. But in any case, we'll give away some of a few copies of Kaiser's book. So that's my announcement. Father Patrick will take the rest.
Perfect. Well, I didn't write them down, Father Jacob Bertrand. You might be frustrated if I forget some.
I'll have to jump back in then, I'm sure.
Just a general thank you to everyone who supports the podcast. We appreciate especially those who are able to support us financially on our Patreon. If you are willing, we certainly want you to like and support this episode and share more about our podcast. Kaiser, you have many projects going on. We'd like to invite you to give like a final word to some of those. How can people follow you and stay with you and support what you're working on?
Yeah, I would love it if they would check out my website. It's kaiser-johnson.com, kaiser-johnson.com. There you can sign up for my email list. It's super low pressure. It's like once a month that I send something out, but it tells you about all the stuff that I've got going on. And also I'm of like social media platforms. I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram. And that's at Kaiser Johnson on both of those. But the best way to stay on top of, if you want to read more that I write or see more things that I've acted in or that kind of thing, that's kaiser-johnson.com and sign up there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. We really appreciate you being on the episode with us today for our guest splaining. We're so proud of that name for the guest splaining episode of Godsplaining.
I know, Father, we've said it like 3 times. So
in the future, we hope to only expand the kinds of splainings that we might be able to do. Mm-hmm. Like coffee splaining or beer splaining, I think would be on the future for us.
Dream big.
But yeah, that's right. Again, a word of thanks to everyone who supports the show. Please know of our prayers for you, and we beg your prayers for us. God bless.
Thanks for listening to Godsplaining, a work of the Dominican Friars of the province of St. Joseph. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Leave a review on your podcast app, and visit us at godsplaining.org.